Okay, before we begin, let me thank each of the trustees for taking the time to participate in this meeting today. For the sake of audio clarity for the public listening to the audio stream via WPSU, following the roll call, trustees should mute their connection when they're not speaking. Jeannie, please call the roll.
Barron?
Here.
Benson?
Here.
Brown?
Here.
Capretto?
Here.
Casey? Here. Cotner?
Here.
Stanley?
Here.
Sandria?
Here.
Duran?
Here.
Dunn? Here. Eccles?
Present.
Senza?
Here.
Goldstein?
Here.
Hahn?
Here.
Herbster?
Here. Here.
Hoffman?
Here.
Huber?
Here.
Jubileer?
Here.
Lord? Lubert?
Here. Sorry.
Lebrano?
Present.
Mosser?
Here.
McCumbee?
Here.
Meade?
Here.
Metaxas?
Here.
Oldsey?
Here.
Pope?
Here.
Potts?
Here.
Rakowicz? Redding?
Here.
Rivera?
Here.
Salvino?
Here.
Schneider?
Here.
Schuyler?
Here.
Silvis?
Here.
Tribeck?
Here.
Weinstein?
Here.
Wolf? And Hanger?
Here.
At its November meeting, the board discussed but took no action on 3 agenda items. Those items identified in the November agenda as items 5D.11, 5D.12, and 5D.13 were considerations for final plan approvals and authorizations to expend funds on 3 capital projects in southeastern Pennsylvania. The board, over the course of several years, has received informational reports on these capital projects and likewise has taken numerous actions in support of the board's anticipated final endorsement of the projects. Those considerations included actions in July 2014 for design build selections for these 3 projects. At its November meeting, and since that time, a number of questions have been asked about these projects. Through the thoughtful and good work of our administration, each trustee has received in advance an informational document that addresses the questions that were raised. During this time, the administration has had a productive dialogue with various members of the board about how we can enhance the university's process for capital projects. To assess whether we can improve upon what I believe is an already rigorous and commendable process, I have asked the administration to commit to solicit public-private partnership proposals as part of the competitive procurement process for the next residence hall project, which will be at Penn State Altoona, and in connection with a project at University Park to construct a mixed-use building located on the university-owned Smith property along Atherton Street. These 2 near-term capital projects would be test cases to add to the university's experience with public-private partnerships and to further assess their utility for future capital projects. President Barron has committed to this course of action in connection with these 2 projects. Additionally, in a similar vein, I've asked the Finance, Business, and Capital Planning Committee at its next meeting to consider a separate cost control initiative. Annually, the university, with the oversight of the Finance, Business, and Capital Planning Committee, seeks to minimize increases in room and board charges. To ensure that the board is fully informed about this important topic and with the objective of further moderation of room and board increases, I have asked the Finance, Business, and Capital Planning Committee to address this subject at its February meeting and to report to the board on this matter to facilitate a discussion to the full board. Therefore, with that background and in context in mind, the sole purpose of today's meeting is for the board to consider and take action on those 3 items, together which are the final plan approval and authorization to expend funds for the residence hall at Penn State Brandywine the Student Union and Dining Building at Penn State Brandywine, and the Student Apartment Building at Penn State Abington. May I have a motion to approve?
This is Ira Lubert. I move the motion.
Second.
Cliff Benson.
It's properly moved and seconded. Is there discussion?
Keith, it's Cliff Benson, if I might comment.
Sure.
Because I serve on the architectural subcommittee for the last 2 years with Trustees Danbley and Oldsey, I've had an opportunity to watch how the process works. And from the RFP process, selection of architects, contractors, final review, in-depth reviews, it's really an outstanding process, which includes our committee, Penn State operations, architectural staff, students, and really allows us a very in-depth look at how these projects are put together and the architects are selected. Ford and his team do a great job, as I think you mentioned, as does the finance group. So, although I understand that I think Bill Oldsey said, and I agree with him, that we should look at every opportunity going forward as to how we might improve the process. I think the process that I've sat through for 2 years is an outstanding process. And I think certainly brings us to the point where, from my standpoint, approving the support for Abington and Brandywine is an easy decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion?
Keith, this is Elliot Weinstein.
Yes, Elliot.
And I think it sounds like there's a lot of things that you said that really do cover a lot of the issues, but I did pass around a motion, which I'd like to read into the meeting and just see how that fits into the conversation for which you just presented.
Elliot, are you proposing an amendment to the motion that's on the floor?
I would like to do that.
Okay.
And I think there's a lot of concurrence with that, so I'm glad to have discussion as well from what I think there was a lot of good things I just heard from what you said as well. I'd like to just enter that in.
So do you want to read in your amendment and
Sure,
then and look for a second?
And then we can have discussion on that. I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. Let me read that in. Whereas the Board of Trustees agreed to approve the Abington and Brandywine projects as proposed, the motion is expanded to also include that the Board of Trustees directs that after January 1st, 2016, all student housing projects or non-academic facilities to include, as an option, a public-private partnership proposal for construction and ownership with management of the facilities remaining with the university for consideration by the Board of Trustees prior to any final approval by the Board of Trustees of a student housing or non-academic facility. The objectives of this expanded motion is to trend all future capital and operating expenditures for the university towards supporting increasingly controlled room and board costs to incoming and existing Pennsylvania students, concurrently increasing affordability and accessibility, and to diminish student debt metrics to graduating students. It is hereby recognized that room and board costs are integral to a total Penn State initiative to also demonstrate stability for tuition costs to students. Therefore, accordingly, the Board of Trustees directs the professional staff of Penn State to bring a plan to the February Board of Trustees meeting for a 3-year moratorium to be implemented for the cost of all room and board, including supplemental charges across all Penn State campuses and for all categories through the year 2018. Compliance with this moratorium will be reported at all subsequent trustee meetings. So thanks for allowing me to answer that.
Chairman Mosser, this is Trustee Oldie. I'd like to second the motion for the amendment.
Okay, so there's an amendment to the motion made by Ira, and there's a second to the amendment. Discussion on the amendment.
Chair Monson, Rick Dandry, may I comment? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Rick, you have the floor.
Okay. We just heard Chair Mosser and President Barron commit to the solicitation of public-private partnerships for 2 concrete projects that are coming up. And that contrasts, Elliot, with your motion, which seeks to have these public-private partnerships solicited for all student housing projects and non-academic facilities. clearly there's a commitment on both measures to exploring the utility of, could somebody mute their line, please? There's background noise. Clearly there's a commitment on the part of both of these measures to explore the utility of public-private partnerships as a way to enhance the cost effectiveness of our capital project process. And I think that the measure that Chair Mosser has proposed is actually a better measure because it's concrete, but it's not as extensive. And I'd like to call upon David Gray in a minute to explain the some of the downsides of soliciting public-private partnerships as part of all student housing projects and non-academic facilities. But before I do, I'd like to go on to the second point, and that is the issue of the 3-year moratorium on housing and room and board increases. So, Elliot, what your motion does is focus on that issue, but with a predetermined conclusion. And in contrast, what Chair Mosser has just proposed is that the issue be directed to the Finance, Business, and Capital Planning Committee to address it as an agenda item at its next February meeting, and then to report to the board. I think by utilizing the committee process and then to facilitate thereafter a full board discussion, we can better inform ourselves about the matter with the same goal, to the extent practical, moderating increases in room and board charges, but without a predetermined result that to me seems imprudent for a number of reasons. And if it's okay, because I think David Gray is particularly has a particular expertise to address both of these subjects, I wonder if I might turn it over to David. Keith, with your permission.
David, you have the floor.
First, with respect to public-private partnerships and using kind of a parallel model to assess public-private partnership versus traditional design, construction, delivery model, we believe that there would be a tremendous amount of process overhead in going down both tracks simultaneously for each and every capital project that the university is contemplating. And that overhead would lead to time delays, which in the construction business, it means additional cost, as well as just, the raw implication for staff that are trying to support both models in parallel fashion. What we believe has been proposed here, which would give us live experience with two impending capital projects and submitting them to the public-private partnership model and a bid along those lines, I think will allow us to learn a great deal about what is imposed upon us in the process of that solicitation and will inform us as to what we can expect in the future and whether it makes sense to dual track all future projects along these lines of soliciting both a public-private partnership model of construction and financing, as well as the more traditional methodology. So my plea would be to let us learn first and then derive the lessons learned and apply them going forward. With respect to the idea of a moratorium, if I can speak to that just for a moment, I think our staff already does a really terrific job of controlling the costs of our room and board rates for our residence hall students. Were that not the case, we would not be in the bottom third as we look across our peer set of the Big Ten institutions plus a handful of selected schools here in Pennsylvania. We have done our utmost to really keep those costs at or around the general rate of inflation, but you have to understand the kind of extraordinary burdens we've been under recently in pursuing that objective. Many of our auxiliary and business service employees are members of the state employees retirement system. That system has imposed upon the university in the last 3 fiscal years employer contribution rate increases of 15%, 20%, and 24% in the most recent year, in the current fiscal year. It is very, very hard for me to conceive how we would be able to declare a moratorium on room and board rates and absorb cost increases associated with utilities, food supplies, and the like, all of which have a natural rate of inflation attached to them, not to mention our employees and their expectation of receiving general salary increases, dealing with health care benefits rate increases, which have averaged 4 to 5% over the last several years. It's just very, very hard for me to see how a moratorium is a practical response, and I would be deeply concerned that what it would wind up doing is, in essence, pulling money from the general funds, from the education and general budget, the primary sources of which are tuition and state appropriation, to subsidize what would almost certainly be deficiencies in those auxiliary services budgets. So I have a hard time understanding how we would meaningfully impose a moratorium. What we are pledging to do, as Chair Mosser has noted, is do a very deep analysis with the Finance, Business, and Capital Planning Committee first, and then on to the full Board of Trustees, of the cost drivers that are extant within our housing and food services budgets, and really look for, leave no stone unturned with respect to the control of costs. But I hope I've given you some indication that we really feel we're already doing that. Thank you.
Chair Mosser?
Further discussion on the amendment?
Yes. Ira Lubert, Ira Lubert, can I speak?
Ira Lubert, yes.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that I think both the motion and the amendment are seeking to drive to the same conclusions, and that is to save costs where possible. It's just that we have a little bit of a difference of opinion on how we get to this conclusion. The point that would concern me the most about the moratorium option is that if, in fact, food costs go up and you can't hedge against food costs, you can't hedge against in utility costs and operating dorms, I would be upset and afraid that in order to achieve their goal, because they have a moratorium on flat costs, that the quality of the food they would purchase could be less than the students are used to. Because one way to save costs is buy lower quality food. So as long as the entire board is aligned that we're looking for saving costs where possible, and we're hearing that the administration is committed to doing that at the next board meeting, bringing us their ideas and proposals, I think it's just how we go about getting this resolved. And I, for one, would suggest that we all get behind the notion that administration will try to cut costs wherever possible on room and board, that we will test the 2 private partnerships. We'll learn a lot from that. I think we're all committed to saving money where possible, if it is possible, and we can move together unified as a board to see how this works. If the folks that have different opinions on different options see in the future that we're really not sincere and it's not working, you can always bring these demands back to the board at a later date, frankly, with a lot of ammunition to do so. But I would frankly beg everybody to get aligned behind this concept of the motion. Let's get it passed, and let's learn from the future on both cost cutting on food and board as well as the private partnerships. Thank you.
Chair Mosser, this is John Hanger. John Hanger.
Yes.
Thank you. First, I want to thank you and Ira and others who have, I think, responded to some of the conversation that's been going on by offering to do public-private partnerships on two projects. I think that's meaningful, and I take your offer about trying to control costs sincerely. Obviously, affordability for students is a prime goal for me and others on this board. I do think it's important to understand accurately what Elliot Weinstein's motion does, and I'm a little concerned listening to the conversation that in some important respects there might be some misunderstanding of what his motion does. I think first it's important to state that his motion calls for the use of public-private partnerships, or the consideration, I should say the consideration, it doesn't require the use, the consideration of public-private partnerships, not on all capital projects. I think that statement was made that it reached all capital projects. It is more targeted than that. It states for student housing and non-academic facilities. And that targeting is based upon a lot of experience that Elliott and others have in business, where other universities have, in fact, found public-private partnerships to be a useful tool for consideration, particularly for those categories of projects. Again, student housing and non-academic facilities. The next thing that I think it is important to understand about his motion is it does not move for a 3-year moratorium. It directs a plan for a 3-year moratorium be brought to the board for review and approval. So first point, it is not requiring a 3-year moratorium. It is directing that a plan be drafted and then be brought to this board. It could go through the finance committee. Whatever appropriate process for writing that plan can be followed. And then the board would review that plan, and maybe David Gray will be proven correct and it's not possible. But on the other hand, maybe it will be shown to be workable. I personally think that public-private partnerships can, in fact, save a considerable amount of money and can help, in fact, achieve that plan. So I do want it understood that it's simply directing a plan, and that plan then comes to the board through its processes for further debate and discussion and approval. And I'm not going to suggest whether that plan, before it's written, is a good one or a bad one, but I think it's perfectly reasonable to do what Elliott is suggesting, that right now it's time to in fact direct the staff to come forward with a plan that can then be reviewed by the board.
So further discussion on the amendment?
Keith, this is Bob Jubilaire. I just have a question maybe Elliott can answer. Would his amendment delay the project to any degree or any time?
The intent is to approve Abington and Brandywine as proposed.
I'm sorry, what?
To approve Abington and Brandywine projects as proposed. The intent is that they go forward.
And
without delay.
Without delay.
Then I would ask, maybe somebody or David or somebody can answer, what is the reason or the negative connotation of this amendment? It would seem to me that it provides just a potential safeguard and good fiscal planning that adds to what has already been done. And the key to me is without delay, that there's no intent to hold up the projects, but to change the process at some point that only the board can decide. I'm trying to find what the negative is on this thing, and so far nobody has really clarified what the negative is.
David, could you clarify, summarize your response to Trustee Jubilaire?
Well, in addition to what I said earlier about the moratorium concept, in contrast to what the primary motion has suggested, so that those points all pertain, and I'm not going to repeat them. I think the concern we would have about really subjecting everything we do now going forward on the with respect to housing projects or non-academic projects would serve to substantially slow down our housing and food services capital plan, and again we would have serious concerns about anything that markedly slows down the timetable for those projects. We have, as the board is well aware, we have a very serious plan plan, some of you even questioned whether the plan for the renovation of East Halls and Pollock Halls over the next 13 years was aggressive enough. And anything that would cause us to, delay through this kind of a mandated approach, I think, would serve to slow that timetable down. And again, in the construction business, time equals dollars, no matter whether we follow a public-private model or a traditional model of construction and financing. So those would be my principal concerns, that we would stand to substantially delay the implementation of the Housing and Foods Capital Plan.
But the author of the amendment says there is no delay. There should be no delay. And so...
Bob, let me clarify, or Trustee Jubileer, let me clarify. There's no delay on the projects on the motion, on the projects in Southeast Pennsylvania, no delay. What David Gray is explaining, that future projects could be delayed.
So as to that concern, I think this is John Hanger. I think it's obviously a intention of the motion to try the public-private partnerships as an option. And if, in fact, David's concern is proved to be real, then we can modify it. I don't believe that this motion is permanent, or the amendment is permanent if it were supported by the board. And certainly, if it's not proving to be useful or harmful in some fashion, I'm sure folks would modify it.
Mr. Chairman, Keith Eckel.
Yes. Yep.
First of all, let me comment that I was very pleased to receive the correspondence from Trustee Weinstein. I haven't had the privilege of meeting him in person to discuss any of this, but I believe, as I look at it, that there is a lot of common ground between the comments that you made when you initiated our meeting today and where Trustee Weinstein is. That second paragraph absolutely underlines what I believe to be all of our commitments to our land grant mission. Certainly, accessibility and affordability is key. I have some concerns in the wording of the second paragraph, because it would appear that in the writing, although I don't believe it's the intent, that all future capital and operating expenditures would be geared towards supporting increasingly controlled room and board costs. I'm sure we're concerned about that, as well as any cost initiated toward paying tuition, and that's slightly confusion. But I honestly believe that the essence of this is exactly what you have described. I do believe it moves more toward a conclusion, and I think it's far more important that we all understand that we're committed to looking hard at these areas in the proper committees and coming back to the board. So I will reluctantly oppose the motion, because I believe it is a very good attempt to reach common ground. But I believe what you have laid out as a commitment of the administration is preferable and doesn't reach preliminary conclusions. We go through it. But voting against that, I personally, as one member of the board, will be on top of making sure and expecting, as long as I'm on the board, that we direct our energies toward these two key concepts of affordability and access.
Chairman Mosser.
Yes.
Chairman Mosser, it's Al Lord.
Okay, Al Lord. Yes, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you, Keith. Look, we are remarkably close on this. I think in essence, each side, to the extent there are even sides involved here, are saying virtually the same thing. My take on this is that what the Chairman Masser outlined early in the conversation today was a promise to take a look, and the resolution put forward by Trustee Weinstein is a formalization of a process, and frankly, is asking management to tell us what it would have to do to hold costs, to freeze costs for 3 years. I have to say, Penn State's going to have to change its processes, just like other schools are going to have to do, if it intends to actually control costs. The one thing I've learned in almost 50 years of in the commercial world is that one never achieves what one doesn't set out to achieve, and the more formalized an objective is, as in this particular case, as formalized in the resolution, the more likely we are to achieve our goals. Everybody's promising that they will take a look at cost cuts, but I've seen what has happened to residence hall costs over the last 20 years and to tuition. And I can assure you that every single year the board had the best of intentions and promised to look hard at costs. This is a requirement to look hard at costs, and in fact will itemize those issues that I think David Gray has outlined are troublesome to him. That's it. I truly think we're very close, and frankly, I like Ira's comments. I'd like Ira and Chairman Masser. I would love for you guys to move a little closer to where Secretary Hanger is. Just a thought. Did I mention anything about the job Johnnies?
All right, guys. Chairman Masser, Ted Brown.
Mark Damley.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to jump in and acknowledge a lot of what other folks are saying. I think we're getting closer to where we need to be. I think that we are virtually in agreement with this. My issue is that I believe that we should show the trust that we have in the administration and the staff and the leadership of Keith and Ira, who put forth at the beginning of the conversation the commitment to achieve the two things that are on the table right now. And I think the optics are good for the board and the administration and the staff. And I don't think there's any misunderstanding about what our commitment and direction is to staff. And I think it would behoove us to trust the staff to take our direction at heart and to come back to us with what we're directing them to do. And so I will also oppose the amendment, but will certainly, as chair of the Finance Committee, put forward the things that are intended to in the direction of the conversation.
Trustee Brown?
Yeah, Ted Brown. I would remind everybody that this is very similar to what happened over the last 2.5 years with tuition increases. 2.5 years ago, I was the only trustee that voted against a tuition increase. And I know that President Barron and David Gray and all his folks are doing a great job of controlling costs. But it was only when this board came together and specifically gave direction that we were not going to support a tuition increase that Dr. Barron and company were able to put together a plan to do just that. This is very similar. I do trust them that they're doing a great job, but I'd like to have it codified just like we did on tuition increase in July 1st. Thank you.
Trustee Lebrano?
Thanks, Chairman Masser. So Trustee Lord beat me to the punch. There's no question.
Always.
There's no question that both you and Trustee articulated very clearly that our objective is to minimize costs and keep education affordable. But in running a business, I know that I'm likely to be far more successful if I reduce to writing those commitments. And so for that reason, I think Trustee Weinstein's amendment is reasonable, because if nothing else, as we go down this path, we certainly can modify the terms of that if we find some of them untenable or unworkable. On the other hand, I know now in 4 years that there sometimes is a tendency to kick things down the road, and I'm really not interested in really doing anything more than forcing us to focus on this, and the best way to do it is to take that commitment that we've all made here today and put it in writing so that we're reminded of it every time we decide that maybe it's not convenient for us to do something. Thank you, Trustee.
Mr. Chairman? Chairman Moss.
Yes.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman?
I just want to briefly correct the record. I was the only president in the state of Pennsylvania that proposed to the legislature a zero tuition increase, and that was based on seeking an appropriation from the Commonwealth. The only difference that occurred was a decision on whether to make that zero prior to getting the state appropriation. And obviously, we're yet to get that state appropriation. That was the only difference, and it wasn't. It was purely this institution and my coming in the door with access and affordability being the highest priority that we put forth. So I just want to make sure that nobody confuses the notion that this institution isn't seriously looking at all costs, and we will have the same attitude and focus on housing and food services as we did with tuition. That was the only difference, is whether or not you do that zero prior to an appropriation or after an appropriation. Thank you for the opportunity to clarify that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
It's Kay.
Hi.
I struggle with the third paragraph on Mr. Weinstein's proposal, and I think that your recommendation at the beginning, where you said it will look at room and board, makes more sense than a plan that already says in it that it's going to have a 3-year moratorium. How can we know what a plan is until we know what the current situation is and what will work? Because of that, I don't understand what Secretary Hanger said about that it's only a plan, because to me, it looks like a plan that calls for a moratorium.
Chairman Mosser, this is Allie. I was actually thinking similarly that as this conversation is going on, it sounds like there are a lot of different interpretations of what this motion would do. So I was wondering if either you or if we had somebody that is acting as a parliamentarian could maybe come in and explain the difference between what would be the actions based on this motion versus if we were to reject that motion and only consider the original motion on the table.
So let me give my interpretation of that, Allie, and thanks for asking that. In the first paragraph, basically, I look at two differences. The proposal that I outlined prior in opening the meeting was that we would take two specific projects and look at this private-public partnership. This first paragraph in this amendment requires that the university look at every project that's a non-academic facility to include a public-private partnership. So, and then the last paragraph, where we're asking for a discussion in the committee level to look at holding costs down. The last paragraph specifically calls for a plan for the university to bring to the board a plan for a 3-year moratorium. And I have problems with that because the plan is specific. If that was worded different, I mean, what we're saying is we're going to go to committee and we're going to probe to look at lowering costs. This is specific language that says the university will bring the board a plan for a 3-year moratorium. And that language is concerning to me. Further discussion on this amendment?
Chair Mosser, this is Matt Schuyler.
Yes, Matt.
I'd just like to echo some of the comments with respect to the third paragraph. I find the board to be quite resolute in its commitment to reducing costs and to managing the efficiency of the enterprise. I find the third paragraph to be unduly specific and unnecessarily binding with respect to that specificity. And I would just echo the sentiments of some fellow trustees in trusting the staff to work with the board on this resolute conviction to manage costs over time without burdening them with such specificity. Thank you.
Further discussion on the amendment?
Yeah, Chair Mosser, Trustee Oldsley, may I have the floor for a moment?
Yes, Trustee Oldsley.
I support Trustee Weinstein's amendment, and frankly, one of the things that I think is directionally absolutely right about it is that it assures that we begin as a matter of practice to consider PPPs and probably other hybrid models to help offset the high cost of new construction. And he's further spelled it out by suggesting that new construction focus on student housing and non-academic buildings. I'm uncomfortable with the notion that there are people in the administration and perhaps others on the board that think that a better approach, rather than assuring that as a matter of practice we begin doing that, which I would contend is a matter of practice at most of our peer universities right now. That instead we would advocate to sort of dip our toes in the water and experiment with those kinds of things with a building on our Altoona Commonwealth campus and one other. I for one believe that we need to be far more aggressive about getting serious about these kinds of other models, and that's one of the reasons that I think that Trustee Weinstein's amendment is absolutely on track.
Further discussion on the amendment?
Keith?
Yes.
This is Paul Silvis. Can I speak?
Yes, you have the floor, Paul.
Yeah. I think we all have agreement that we want to keep tuition low. We want to keep housing costs low. I mean, we're all laser focused on affordability with this. The problem I have is that we're not doing our homework. I mean, the first time I've really heard about this private-public partnership to any extent has been in the last couple of weeks. And the first time I've heard about a 3-year moratorium has been in this motion. There's been no discussion that I remember. Maybe I'm wrong, but there's no discussion I remember in the board. So it seems to me that we're really, putting a hammer on this and rushing decisions without really taking the time to sit and talk and go through committees and spend some time on this to see if this is the right thing or not. So I couldn't support a motion that directs us to do something that we've not had any discussion around or really looked at ramifications with or spent any time on. I mean, it's a surprise motion that that we need to talk about as a team. Thank you.
Chair Moss.
Allie, Trustee Goldstein.
I think it was
Cal. I already spoke up.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Casey, Trustee Casey.
Yep. Thank you, Chair Mosser. I just want to also reinforce the comments of Trustee Silvis and Schuyler. I think they both make very good points about the common objectives that we all seem to share, but the need for, I think, more thoughtful consideration of some of the facts that would help us determine what the best way is to address reducing costs. I think that the proposal that you laid out is a good way forward in giving us the opportunity to do that. And again, while I completely appreciate the interest behind Trustee Weinstein's proposal, I do worry that it is presumptive in terms of directing a 3-year moratorium, and would love to give the board a greater opportunity to think about this in more detail and make a judgment on what the best way is to address reducing costs. So I would have to oppose it for the same reasons.
Chairman, further discussion? Yes.
Yeah. This is Luke Metaxas. For me, as a student who's currently living in Resident Falls, I really appreciate the discussion going on about reducing the cost of student living. I really appreciate the proposal from Trustee Weinstein and also all the discussion about the public-private partnerships. However, I do agree that this is too quick. I disagree with Trustee Oldsley in the fact that this should be more aggressive. I think as a student, even paying this, I think we should take our time and make sure we make the right decision. I agree with my other trustees that I would like to see further discussion, but I do not agree with this amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion on the amendment?
Keith, it's Cliff Benson. Just a quick comment, and Bill and I agree on an awful lot of things since we sit on this committee together, but I really have very significant concerns about the third paragraph and the moratorium, because until we have a chance to understand what the financial impacts would be on the university, what it would be on our bond ratings and everything else, to try and rush into that today makes no sense to me, because actually we're here today because the proposal on the two campuses we couldn't agree on 2 months ago. We've studied it further, which is great, but to rush into this today, it makes no sense to me.
That was a month ago, Cliff.
Are we ready to call the vote? Jeannie, would you do a roll call vote?
Keith Eckel, I'll call for the question.
Wait, this is a vote on the amendment, Chairman Martin?
Yes, it's a roll call vote on the amendment.
Thank you.
Please indicate yes if you're voting for the amendment, and no or nay if you're voting against the amendment.
Benson?
No.
Brown?
Yes.
Capretto?
Yes.
Casey?
No.
Cotner?
No.
Stambly?
No.
Dandria?
No.
Duran?
Yes. Yes.
Dunn?
Yes.
Eckel?
No.
Penza?
No.
Goldstein?
No.
Hahn?
No.
Harpster?
No.
Hoffman?
No.
Huber?
No.
I'm sorry, there's static. You could mute your phones if you're not being called on. Betsy Huber?
No.
Jubelier?
Yes.
Lord?
Yes.
Lubert?
No.
Lebrano?
Yes.
Mosser?
No.
McCumbee?
Yes.
Mead?
No.
Metaxas?
No.
Oldsey?
Yes.
Pope?
Yes.
Potts?
No.
Redding?
Yes.
Rivera?
Yes.
Salvino?
No.
Snyder?
No.
Schuyler?
No.
Silvas?
No.
Tribeck?
Yes.
And Weinstein?
Yes.
The motion does not carry.
What was the vote?
It was, I got 21 to 13, I think.
14.
14.
Yeah, right, 21-14.
We're at 21-14.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're back to the motion to approve the projects. Is there further discussion on that? So hearing none, Jeannie would do a roll call vote on approving the projects.
Benson?
Yes.
Brown?
No.
Capretto?
No.
Casey?
Yes.
Cotner?
Yes.
Stambly?
Yes.
Dandria?
Yes.
Duran?
No.
Dunn?
No.
Eckel?
Yes.
Penza?
Yes.
Goldstein?
Yes.
Hahn?
Yes.
Harpster?
Yes.
Hoffman?
Yes.
Huber?
Yes.
Jubelier?
No.
Lord?
No.
Lubert?
Yes.
Lebrano?
No.
Mosser?
Yes.
McCumbee?
Yes.
Mead?
Yes.
Metaxas?
Yes.
Oldesy?
No.
Pope?
No.
Pop?
Yes.
Redding?
No.
Rivera?
No.
Salvino?
Yes.
Schneider?
Yes.
Schuyler?
Yes.
Silvas?
Yes.
Tribeck?
No.
Weinstein?
No.
Okay,
2213.
2213. Okay, the motion carries.
Mm-hmm.
I want to thank the members of the board for your participation today on this important matter, as this was the sole purpose of the meeting, and there's being no other business, this concludes the meeting.